things off here. Thanks everyone for joining. Quick intro, I'm Ranga Rajagopalan. I'm a new VP of Alumni Relations. I'm volunteering for the Chicago Booth Alumni Club of San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm really happy to introduce this presentation today. So I'm really pleased to introduce Hoke tonight. Hoke will be speaking to us about a topic that is no doubt on many of our minds, how to become a tech company CFO. Hoke graduated from Chicago Booth in 1997 and has worked at both consulting firms and tech companies. I actually first met Hoke in 2010 when he recruited me as a summer MBA intern at Juniper Networks after my first year at Booth. Hoke was the VP of pricing at the time, and I guess I did a decent job as he extended me an offer to work full-time on his team after I graduated from Chicago Booth. I supported the security business unit at Juniper as part of the FP&A team, and then followed Hoke to Groupon, where I was the senior manager of tech finance there. After Groupon, our paths did diverge as Hoke became the CFO of Digital River in Minnesota, and I joined Yelp in San Francisco to run the revenue model. But I really jumped at the opportunity to rejoin Hoke at Infoblox when I learned that he had returned to the Bay Area, and I'm currently the director of tech finance, leading a global team in support of engineering, product management, and IT. So having worked under Hoke at Juniper, Groupon, and now Infoblox, I know firsthand the value of his approach to career development. Hoke brings decades of experience managing world-class teams, and he always has an eye towards making teams more efficient in their day-to-day tasks to free up time for value-added work for business partners. In my experience working for him, finance has always had a seat at the table in making key strategic decisions. I've heard him deliver this talk before, breaking into executive ranks, and it's really what's inspired me to pursue the career path that I'm on, in hopes of one day landing that COO/CFO role, to begin with probably at a small tech startup, but eventually a larger company. So it's my pleasure to pass it off to Hoke now to take us through how to do what he did and become a tech company CFO.
Thanks, Ranga. I'm happy to be here today. Look forward to meeting you guys. I think you have a couple of housekeeping things to take care of. So encourage you to use the Q&A function to submit questions at the end. I'll take Q&A. If you do, I'm used to doing this presentation live. I guess like everybody else, I'm adapting to being on Zoom, and so it's going to be a little interesting. I won't be able to read body languages and see reactions in the room, but encourage you. Please, it says once the talk is complete, you don't have to. Anytime in the presentation, raise your hand. And at a natural pausing point, I'll take a question because I'm going to be showing you some data slides that will probably prompt questions. It works better, I think, if you ask the questions and I answer them while we're in the middle of the presentation. So with that, let's get going. Why don't you guys turn back over control to me? I'm coming to you today from Tacoma, Washington. I recently moved back up to the Seattle area. We have our onshore center of excellence based here, and a good chunk of my team is here. So I recently moved up here. So I'm coming to you from the from the Puget Sound. I've lived all over, and again, look forward to sharing with this presentation with you. Again, I've done it a number of times at Booth, at other business schools. And I think you'll find it hopefully interesting. Just as background, this is originally work that I did for myself. I've had a long time goal of becoming a tech CFO. I can show you a deck when I wrote when I was starting to exit McKinsey. I'll get to my career as part of the presentation, so bear with me. But I wrote a deck, and the very first page of the deck is I wanted to be a CFO. That was my goal. And so I was sitting in a company and a step away from the CFO role, and I was getting kind of tired of waiting. And so I tried to figure out what it would take, what kind of age would was the window you typically get to be a CFO. So I developed this initially for myself. I ended up presenting it to MBA interns like Ranga and others, and they started asking questions and kept expanding based on the data that I was able to pull together. And so let's jump into it. So some caveats before I get going. This is, again, research I did initially for myself and expanded after doing some summer interns. they're my history, my biases, my whatever color this. The research, this is based on, as you'll see in a few minutes, this is based on looking at 68 CFOs in tech companies in the Bay Area. The research isn't completely exhaustive. It's based on looking at LinkedIn and looking at press releases and things like that. I may have misclassified things, or I might have missed some steps and things. So any of the errors are my own, not intentional. And again, this isn't meant to be academic research. It's meant to be informative for initially for me and for MBA students, and then folks like you. A little bit about my path, and I would encourage you, as you know, the CFOs you work for, the CFOs that you meet and know, ask them about their path, because what you'll find is that they're all going to be different. They're all likely to be very unique, and they all have their own little lessons for you to learn. So here's my journey as to how I got to the CFO seat. So I don't know if you can hear the accent or not, but I'm originally from the mountains of Virginia, and that's where I went to for my undergrad. I studied electrical engineering and economics. A couple internships showed me I didn't want to be an electrical engineer. And so I ended up taking a job with what's now called Accenture. It was Anderson Consulting when I graduated from school, but doing IT consulting work, installing systems, IT systems for primarily consumer products companies. Enjoyed that, but decided I wanted to be involved in decisions upstream that lead to an IT implementation. So that's when I went to get my MBA at Chicago. Graduated in '97. That's my first time I discovered finance. I had no idea what finance was until I got to Booth. And so I took my first finance class, fell in love with it. I did that first finance class though in January. And so I missed the window to interview with banks for a summer internship, because that's what you did, at least back in the mid '90s when you were doing finance. And so I did consulting and assumed I would come back and do banking. When I heard the horror stories of people spending their summer, going in and seeing the sun the first day and not seeing it again until the end of their internship, I said I didn't want to do that. And so I was actually considering getting a PhD in finance. But then Tom Copeland, my partner at McKinsey, the co-author at the time anyway of the valuation book that McKinsey writes, I'm guessing many of you use in the valuation course, came to present because they were hiring MBAs for the first time. And so I ended up joining McKinsey in the corporate finance practice. And so I worked with Tim Kohler and Tom Copeland, the authors of the book, and did kind of a combo banking strategy consulting work. And that's where when I was deciding to leave McKinsey, I developed a document that lay out kind of where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. And that's the thing in the first page was I wanted to be a CFO. And so I went to work for a client of mine, Microsoft. And my first job, I was CFO, chief of staff to Microsoft CFO. I did a number of roles there. Can probably refer to that later on in the discussion. But the highlight of the time there was I was CFO for the Windows business. So the heart and soul at the time anyway of the company. I was CFO for that. I left there to come to the Bay Area and joined Juniper. I was CFO for the security software and security business, that's where I developed this analysis that you're about to see. I was a step away from the CFO seat, was trying to figure out how to get into it, and discover what I'll describe later. But it's the catch-22 problem. If a CFO, they want somebody who's done it before. So how do you get them to give you the first CFO gig? So I did this analysis to kind of figure out the window and of time that I was looking at. And then as part of, I realized I wasn't going to get the CFO Juniper seat. To expand the opportunities for me, that's when I went to Groupon, so I could open up consumer technology in addition to enterprise technology. So I spent a couple of years at Groupon. I was CFO for North America and for all the corporate roles and functions. And then I got my first CFO gig after that, Digital River in Minneapolis. If you're not familiar with them, they are an e-commerce provider for large brands. So they do, if you buy from Samsung.com today, you're actually buying from Digital River in the US. Up until a couple of years ago, if you bought from Microsoft, you were actually buying from Digital River all around the world. Outside of the US, if you buy from Adobe online, you're actually buying from Digital River. That was my first CFO gig, and it was my first time experiencing a private equity-owned company. And then that brings me to today, where I'm now CFO of Infoblox. For those who aren't familiar, which I guess most of you are not, Infoblox is a network software, enterprise software solution provider. We're about 500 million in revenue, just over 500 million in revenue, 1,400 employees, owned by Vista Equity Partners. Vista Equity Partners is the largest private equity firm in the software space. And we're one of 65 companies they've got in the portfolio. I'll talk a bit about what it's like to work in a private equity firm a bit later in the presentation. So that's my journey. So So what? What does it mean? What does a CFO, what's it take to get to be a CFO? And kind of at the heart of the challenge of getting to this seat, my experience and what this data I'm about to show you will suggest is that the role is super broad and super deep. And maybe no one but the CEO has as complex and mixture of responsibilities as a CEO. So you've got, on one hand, you've got all the things the controller does. So deep knowledge of accounting, GAAP financials, doing controls and compliance, managing SEC filings, doing the internal audit. So there's deep knowledge of technical accounting rules, and deep knowledge of working, if you're a public company, working with the SEC and public filings, et cetera, on one hand. And on the other side, you've got the finance type responsibilities. So building an annual plan, managing the performance of the company. And if, again, it's public, you are managing the relations with all the investors. You're doing IR, working with analysts. You are having to line up the capital structure, maybe lining up debt, managing the sale of equity, et cetera. And not in all cases, but in many cases, the CFO is also in charge of corporate strategy and doing M&A. So those two very different types of classes of responsibilities. And then on top of that, we want you to, in many cases, run real estate, run IT, be the engine of transforming a company, leading procurement, owning tax, et cetera, while you manage relations with the boards, while you're serving as a member of a high-powered, high-ego, high self-assessed executive team, and leading a large finance organization. Again, the others may debate with me, but the breadth of the type of responsibilities that you have in times the depth that you have to go, the only one who exceeds that, I think, in an executive team is the CEO. And so I've already made the point about the CEO, and you typically find people who make a CFO, they typically come from one of those two backgrounds. They're heavy on the accounting side, going up the control ranks, or like me, coming out of the strategy finance type path is one of the two paths. And so when I get now, I get multiple pings a week, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Once you're in the CFO card carrying club, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute, everybody wants to talk to you. And so I get job descriptions all the time, and they all read the same. I don't care if it's a 100-person startup or if it's a multi-billion-dollar company. The job descriptions all read the same. They want somebody who walks on water. Their ideal candidate will have been, a VP of finance at a large company, running a planning process, coordinating with executive teams, et cetera, et cetera. They will have, before that, they would have been a partner at E&Y or KPMG. They'll have deep knowledge of accounting and the like. But more than that, they've also done a stint at a strategy consulting firm, developing corporate strategy while being PR spokesperson for, a politician. And, by the way, have deep knowledge of, the tax law and tax structures and things like that. And, by the way, know the ins and outs of hedging and the like. It's, so that's what the job descriptions read like. And the reality is that there is no way any one person can master these areas in your career. Just factually, you can't. There's no way that any one person can master all the things that you read these job descriptions of a CFO that they'd want you to do. And so I can promise you that the first time that you try to get a CFO seat, you will have holes. In fact, anytime you try to get a CFO role, you will have holes in your resume. And if you come out of the accounting side, your deep accounting, they'll be wondering, can you do the finance? If you've got deep finance experience, they're wondering, can you do the accounting side? For me, that's what I got asked. I got tired of being asked that, so I literally got my CPA to get that to go away. It did. Then they started saying, well, can you do the investor relations? Can you do the insert blank here? So I don't care who you are. The first time you try to get a CFO seat, if they want to, they can shoot a hole in your resume and deny you the role. And so the objective is that to get a CFO seat, you have to get someone to take a chance on you. That is the goal. You have to get someone who's willing to say, yes, I've got these set of requirements. This person doesn't have them all, but based on whatever, I'm going to take a chance on them. And so you want a CEO and a board that will take a chance on you. And then once you get that CFO seat, the very first one, all those questions go away. It's super frustrating. And I promise you, some of you may be experiencing this now, and others of you, it's going to be in your future. But you will get frustrated with the catch-22 situation. I promise you. I'll give you my one example from my background. It was like the time I was ready to throw in the towel. I had been, there was my mentor, the former CFO of Microsoft, he's a venture capitalist, called me. He's on the board of a company that has software developer tools, and they were looking for a CFO, and he recommended me. So I came in to interview, and again, I've written code. I've been in my school days, in my first job, I've written code. I have supported the largest software development org in the world as a finance person, as the CFO for the Windows business. I have built and run the first pricing team at Microsoft. So I've done pricing as it relates to enterprise software. I have done product licensing. I have done channel strategy related to software. So skills the typical finance person won't have, I had experience in. I knew a board member who was vouching for me. The interviews went well, and they gave the job to somebody who had been CFO at about a $25 million company, because he had done the job before, and never met him, know anything about him, but there's zero chance that individual had the background and experience and skills that I had, but they'd had the seat and I hadn't. I can just promise you, there's a high probability that before any of you get your first CFO seat, you will have a story, and not multiple stories like that. And it's because they can, because they can find a hole relative to the job description. So again, the secret of getting your first CFO gig is to get somebody to take a chance on you. And once you're in, all those questions go away, and then it gets to be the fit, and do you fit culturally? Do they have a particular need? They're looking for someone to drive a bunch of acquisitions, et cetera, et cetera. But before you get that first one, it's all about their inclination is going to be to reject you because you haven't done the seat before. So with that intro, how can you get to be a public company CFO? There's three ways. You can be the CFO that takes them public. So you can join them when they're private and take them public. You can be promoted from internally. So you can be one of the lieutenants, VPs reporting into the CFO, they leave, you get promoted. Or you can be hired from the outside. And there's pros and cons to either one of these. If you're promoted from, if you take the company public, it's a super cool experience. It seems like from the outside, I've never been through it myself, but it seems like it's a great experience. It's generally very, very lucrative, and it puts you on an even smaller circle. So if you have a circle of folks who've been CFOs and you're on the outside looking in, there's an even smaller circle inside of that, CFOs who've taken a company public. And if you're inside that one, you get calls on all the hot companies that are looking to go public because you've taken a company public before. So the same kind of catch-22 scenario. Yeah, you're a CFO, but you've never taken a company public. And so those are the pros. The cons is that luck is a much bigger role. Do you pick the right company that makes it public? Does the board decide that, yes, you've done a good job as a CFO and we're about to go public and we're still going to let you be the one to take us public? Or are we going to thank you for your service and then go find one of those people who've taken a CFO company public before, and are they going to bring them in so that they've got an experienced person to take them public? And there's a heck of a lot higher risk. Risk that the company goes bust, your job goes away, they decide they don't like you for whatever reason, and you're out. The internal promotion is again, I told you that the secret is getting someone to take a chance on you. So that is, in some ways, if you can get the most, if you can get someone, the people who most likely to take a chance on you are going to be people who know you. And if you've been inside the company for a while, that's great. So you'll be familiar with the organization. You'll probably have a strong bond with the leadership of the company. The challenge is there's only one seat at the company, and if that CFO is doing a great job and isn't going to leave, you could be stuck. You could be killing it. You could be the hottest thing since sliced bread, and unless this change the CFO leaves, there's no spot for you to go up to. If you do get promoted internally, the other thing that can happen is it can be awkward because now you've gone from managing, being part of a peers with a group of finance leaders to now you're leading them. External hire, there's a lot of options because basically any other company that you're not working at is an option. And when you get hired in, there's a very clear mandate. you are the CFO. They looked at internal candidates and decided that you were the person that they wanted. However, it's, you're going to have to get used to a new company, a new culture, a new business potentially, while also, doing the CFO gig, if it's the first time, for the first time. And depending on what drove them to go outside the company, it could be very disruptive. If they're going outside because they're going through a lot of difficulties as a company and they have no confidence in their bench, they bringing you in, you're going to be trying to fight a fire while also rebuilding a finance team, et cetera, et cetera. So there's pros and cons to all three of them. So which one's best? So before we get to that, let's oops. So there's a bunch of questions that I'm going to try to answer. And these are ones that I asked myself, or that again, some of the MBA folks that I was dealing with. But is one of those paths better? To take a company public, or to be hired internally, or to get hired externally? What's the time frame? How old might you be? What's the window where you can get that first CFO gig? Is it better to come from the accounting background or the finance background? If you want to be a tech CFO, do you need to get into tech right away, or can you go do something outside of tech and then come into tech? Is it better to go big company or small company? And if you're thinking about or currently in banking or consulting, is that a help, a hindrance, or neither? You guys are all assuming already had your MBA or in process of getting your MBA, but how important is an MBA to becoming a tech CFO? How important is a CPA? And if you want to be a CEO of a tech company, is CFO a viable path? These are all the questions I'm going to answer. Happy to take others and either answer based on facts or answer based on gut, or tell you I don't know. But these are the ones I'm getting ready to go through. And to answer them, the way I went about answering them is trying to base it on facts. As I started with, the Mercury News is the newspaper for San Jose, the newspaper Silicon Valley. And they publish what they call the Silicon Valley 150. It's the 150 largest companies in Silicon Valley. And I screened out everybody who had a market cap less than $1 billion. I screened out all biotech companies because I wasn't interested in going there. And I screened out anybody who had no sitting CFO because there was nobody to include in. I didn't want to include an acting CFO in the data set because they weren't the real thing. They hadn't been selected. And so what came out of that was 68 companies. Now, I did this 6-7 years ago, guys. You'll notice some of the logos no longer are standalone companies. I can't guarantee that the facts are still the same if I was to repeat this. But I'm pretty confident that at most it'd be shaving around the corners. But these are the 68 companies, from biggest market cap to smallest. So you have Google, Apple, you've got Facebook, etc. But Yahoo's there. Yahoo's no longer with us. But those are the 68 CFOs that I went and did research on. And so I did it myself. I pulled out their LinkedIn profile. I pulled out the press release announcing their hiring. I looked in their proxy statements to get their compensation. I Googled articles about them and interviews they have done to get stories, and I compiled all of this into a set data set. So let's give you some demographics for the data set. So when you look at those 68 companies, the largest share of them they're in one of, call it 6 categories. In semiconductors, that was the largest share. You have folks like Intel and NVIDIA. In software, you have Oracle or Adobe or Intuit and like. In the networking space, Cisco. Internet services, that's Google and Facebook. Computer hardware, you have HP, Apple, Agilent, and you have others, kind of unusual things. So think Tesla in automobiles, electric automobiles, Dolby in sound, in sound and audio. Systems. How big are they? At the time, they had almost, the average of the 68 companies had an average revenue was almost $8 billion. The median smaller than that. Again, I screened everybody out that was south of $1 billion in market cap. And so you start getting some companies start to get smaller. So the median was $1.5 billion. Apple was the biggest at the time at almost $128 billion, and the smallest was somebody with 100 million. And so that was, I don't remember who that is, but that's clearly a high flyer that had IPO'd early. From a market cap standpoint, the average was 25 billion. The median was 4 billion. The max Apple again now would be 2 trillion. It's crazy to think about, but 600 million at the time. And again, the minimum was 1 billion. The next slide, again, the next part of the slide may not apply to everybody, but it was just to show people, if you want to be a Silicon Valley, people sometimes think Silicon Valley equals San Francisco, and I wanted to show them it's actually not. When you think of Silicon Valley, you look at the headquarters of these 68 companies. The vast bulk of them, only a handful of them are in San Francisco. At the time, 8. That's probably up from that number, but not much. The bulk of Silicon Valley goes from Palo Alto over to Milpitas. And so you got 3, 8, 28, 41, 46 of the 68 are in the South Bay area, going from Palo Alto, Mountain View, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, San Jose, and Milpitas. So that's when you think of Silicon Valley, that's actually Silicon Valley, not San Francisco. So anyway, so what about demographics of the actual CFOs themselves? On average, they were 50 years old, same as the median. The oldest was 68, and the youngest was 40. And then from a gender standpoint, I was actually a bit surprised. At the time, the Fortune 500, 91% of the Fortune 500 CFOs were male, 9% were female. In this group of 68, it's 15% were female. So it's normally tech does not maybe lead as it relates to gender representation, but in the case of at least the CFOs, they were higher proportion than the Fortune 500. Still a very small percentage, very small percentage. In terms of tenure, the average was just over 4 years. Median was 4 years. The max was that person who was 68 was almost 26 years. And the minimum they had just joined, literally been announced a few weeks before I did the announcement. In terms of how much they made, again, all I did here was pull, I pulled what was reported in their most recent proxy statement from May the previous year. And so it didn't factor in all of the future earnings of the things that they've been granted, but average was 4 million. The median was 2.3. The largest, that was Safra Catz at Oracle at the time, made it just over 40 million. And again, the minimum was 400K. That's not really what they made, but that's all that's not what their salary, et cetera, was. They had literally just joined in time to make it into the proxy statement and get a little bit of earnings. So now let's get to the fun stuff. If you could become a CFO, what's the best route? So I took the 68. 9 of the CFOs got there by taking the company public. 26 were promoted from internally. 33 were hired from outside. But I think it's more interesting to know, were they were they a first-time CFO, or was this the second or greater time they were a CFO? So when you broke the data that way, it gets becoming really interesting. If you want to be a public tech company CFO, already be one. You know, I told you the point was the trick to becoming a CFO is to convince somebody to take a chance on you. And again, and then once you've got that first CFO seat, all those questions go away. So the easiest, best way to become a CFO of a company is already to be one. Well, that isn't really helpful, right? Because presumably, other than me, there's many other people who have been CFOs on the call. If there are, I'd love to hear from you. See if you agree with what I'm saying. So let's eliminate those 36 and go, okay, what's the people who've never been a CFO before? What's the best path? And the best path is get promoted by the CEO that knows you. So 20 of the 32 first-time CFOs were promoted internally. Again, the board knows them, the CFO knows them. They are comfortable taking the share, taking the chance on them. The second best route then is to get hired, but from outside. But if you're getting hired on the outside, you're going to get hired by a small to medium-sized company. So 9 CFOs got their first CFO role as a public company CFO by being hired externally. When you look at the 9, what's interesting about them, the largest was Juniper Networks. That was actually my boss at Juniper. She was hired in when they were at the market cap was 14 billion. But all the others are less than 10. In fact, 5 of the 9 are less than 3 billion. So smaller companies can't be maybe as picky, and maybe willing to take more of a chance on a strong candidate who hasn't had the seat before. That's the way to think about it. So the best path is to get promoted internally. But if you can't get promoted internally, then be hired by a small to medium-sized company outside. And potentially work your way up if your goal is to be a big company CFO. So how old might you be? What's the window? I took the 32 first. I didn't bother going back in and get all 68. When did they first become CFOs? I took the 32 who were becoming CFO for the first time. I said, how old were they when they were appointed CFO? And the average was almost 45. The youngest made CFO for the first time at the age of 37. The oldest at becoming a first time CFO was 58 when they became CFO, and you kind of do the 20th, 80th percentile of the 32 when ranged from 40 to 50. So basically, you got your 40s if you want to be a tech CFO. I can tell you guys now I'm 51. I became CFO for the first time in 2015. I was 46. Smack in the middle of this. So that's the window that you're looking at. And so you may look at that and be really aggressive, and I want to be CFO at the age of 35. It might be hard. If you're sitting at 40, then you're in the window. If you're approaching 50, can do it, but your window is narrowing rapidly. That's how I would describe it. Is it better to come from the accounting background or come from the finance background? Again, this is one of the more judgment-related questions. I had to judge based on somebody's background. Like if they got hired into the role and they were a partner at an audit firm, they were obviously in accounting. If they had spent time at one of the big four and was the corporate controller and got hired in, they were on the accounting side. If they've never come close to accounting and you see FP&A and you see finance, strategy, et cetera, that's how I tag them as finance. And this is one that could potentially change based on the time frame. I think the last one wouldn't, or nothing we've shared to date actually would. This one might. And we went back to the mid-2000s when Sarbanes-Oxley was having to be implemented, for those that remember that. And we were coming off of the environment where you had lots of, you had Enron and other scandals going on. I'm guessing that you would have seen a higher proportion of people with controller accounting background. When you get, it's been a long time since there's been an accounting type scandal and you're in the big growth mode, et cetera, then people are going to maybe lean in more towards the finance and the deal making kind of side. So it kind of really, in my mind, there's no clear preferred. You can go either path. It really depends on what the company needs. If the company had some accounting issues and or control issues or the like, I can guarantee you the next CFO is going to come from a controller accounting background. If their business has been booming, they're generating lots of profits, and they need to figure out where they're going to deploy those profits, maybe with M&A, you're going to find somebody that comes from the finance strategy background. In fact, you probably find somebody that's got maybe a banker type background. So it kind of depends on the company. Do you need to get into tech right away? Again, remember these questions are targeted at MBA students, so folks farther into the career, may be less applicable to you. But the question they were wondering is, do I need to get into tech right away coming out of business school? And so what I did is I tagged where people got their primary finance experience. So again, pure judgment on my part, reading through their background, trying to assess. In some cases, it was pretty obvious. So Kathy Lejak, who was the CFO of HP up until not too long ago, she started her career out, I think it was her second job. It was first after business school, and she did nothing but time at HP. So that was really easy. She got her formative finance experience at HP. And there were a number of others. And in some ways you're not surprised by the companies where people come from. They tend to be the academy type companies. I'm guessing if I repeated this now, I would see Microsoft as an example on this list. Actually, I know I would. But because I know several of the CFOs now in the Valley are ex-Microsoft. I know them. I work with them. But you would see Microsoft. You're probably starting to see Google. And so companies that became really big and people who rose up and could no longer keep rising or were starting to hit ceilings in terms of people ahead of them and started moving out and people coming in and raiding those super successful companies. That's what happens. And so Intel, IBM, Sun, HP, you probably then have Microsoft and Google. At some point, you'll get Facebook and et cetera. And so that's just the way kind of things flow. And so I assigned to the 68 CFOs where I thought they got their formative finance experience. 5 of them were at HP, 2 at Intel, 2 at IBM, 2 at Sun. 28 got at they did more than one. They clearly moved around, but they were all they were name brand companies that you would know, and that represented 20 of them. And then 10 were at other big name companies, but they were the only one, so I didn't have enough room. So say one would have been at Apple as an example, and one would have been at I'm sure Microsoft is one for the inside the 10. But so think of those as single companies. It's obvious that was the company, but I just grouped them together for presentation purposes. 5 of them came out of big accounting firms, 2 out of GE, 6 at other non-tech companies, and 6 across multiple non-tech companies. And so when I look at that, I see 49 of the 68 were at tech, 5 were accounting, but it looked like they were doing accounting primarily in Silicon Valley. So almost certainly a heavy portion, if not the entirety of their accounting work, was focused on technology companies, and 14 were non-tech. So the folks who become CFOs at tech companies spend a large portion of their developmental finance experience at tech companies. And so if you want to be a tech CFO, you should if you're in tech, stay here. And if you're not, you should probably be moving to quickly get into tech, because the tech background does matter, does count. So vast majority of folks spend their careers at tech. Should I go big company or should I go small company? And again, just like the route to CFO, there are pros and cons to each of them. So going with the big company, so becoming and joining and participating in the finance development program at a Microsoft or at Google or whatever, there's more structured development. The brand name matters. People value seeing big names, big successful names on a resume. So it gets you into consideration for jobs. And they like also the experience. So you learn how big companies do big things. And then so smaller companies value that. Newer companies that are trying to grow into the next big companies value that. It's also more stable and it's more safe. I mean, you're less likely to be, the big successful tech companies are less likely to be disrupted and less likely to be doing layoffs and things like that. The cons for it, though, is that your role will tend to be much narrower. I'm sure again, Microsoft and Google, there is somebody that is doing nothing but managing the costs associated with the office buildings all around the world, and their job is like that narrow. And your progression is likely going to be slower. It's harder to stand out. It's harder to get accelerated up the path. It's hard to get thrown kind of a big opportunity and you nail it, and that gets you popped up the big role. On the small side, you get a lot more options around growing. It can be faster. Your roles, just by the very nature of the company, will tend to be much wider. And there's a heck of a lot more small companies for you to go work at. Again, to remind you can go back to the demographics of the companies. The average revenue was 4 or 5 billion, but the median was 1.5. So that tells you there's a lot more at the lower end of the scale than there's at the upper end. On the con side, they won't have the formal development programs. You'll be a lot more self-directed. You're unlikely to get resume benefit out of it. You'll be working for companies. Again, I work at LinkedIn. It's a phenomenal company. I promise you guys. I'm guessing almost none of you have heard of it, and it would carry no weight if it came across your you were screening resumes as an example. And it's a heck of a lot more volatile. Companies can blow up. Companies, my company, I joined 2.5 years ago. We were taken private by Vista Equity Partners 4 years ago. There was a lot of turmoil coming after that. At some point, nature of the company, we will be sold again, and there'll probably be some turmoil coming after that. So there's just a lot more volatility associated with it. So as with anything in life, there's pros and cons. What I did is I looked at how many employers had the CFOs typically been at. And so on average, they had been at 4.6. The median was 5. The highest, somebody had been at 9, and one person, as Kathy Lee Jack, in an example, had only been at 2 in her entire career. But that differs based on the size of the company. So if you were a CFO of the 6 companies that were market cap north of $1 billion, the average number of employers that those CFOs had was 3. Contrast that with the 40 companies that were 1 to 5 billion in market cap. From the 1 to 10 million market cap, it was 4.8. So smaller companies tend to move more. So again, look at me. I've had, how many employers have I had? I've had Accenture, McKinsey, Microsoft, Juniper, Groupon. My 6th job after college is when I got my first CFO gig at Digital River. My Digital River was my 6th job. and now I'm at 7 at Infoblox. And I mean, I'm in the smaller company size. Infoblox, when we're taking private, it took $1.4 billion to take us private 4 years ago. Today, I'm guessing we're worth double that. And so I'm still in the smaller end of this. And so, my takeaway from it that there's of the 68 CFOs, only 4 had gotten their primary CFO experience at the company in which they were CFO. 3 of the 4 were CFOs of the $100 billion market cap company. And so the kind of my conclusion from all this is that it is highly, highly, highly likely you're going to move in your career. And so deciding between a big company and a small company really depends on you and your ambition. If you want to be CFO of Microsoft or Google or Facebook, you better go to work in there, because they're almost certainly going to hire their CFOs in the future from inside. There's rare that those guys go outside. But if that isn't one of your goals, then it really comes down to, if you're comfortable being self-directed in your career development, if you're comfortable with a higher risk environment, I would encourage you will have a faster career growth. You will I think have a more varied career, which will set you up well to get this seat at a smaller high growth company. If you like and need structure and you need guidance then I would tell you to start at one of the big companies. And unless you want to be CFO of one of the big companies around the director levels, I would tell you to then go to the smaller high growth companies. It's what I would guide you to. That's my advice based on this data and my own experience. Should you specialize in treasury or specialize in FP&A or specialize in accounting, or should you generalize? And this is one where I didn't know how, and I didn't have the energy to go and document extensively the data around this, because short of interviewing them and understanding each of them how they got to the seat, I didn't have a metric that I could prove to you in a data informed way my intuition and what my perusal of the facts around them would suggest. But in almost every case, based on my reading, there were some exceptions, as there are with anything, but in almost every case, the CFOs had a wide-ranging experience. They spent time in FP&A, they spent time over in Treasury, they spent time in field finance, they spent time in corporate center, et cetera. And so you can specialize in a function. You can go up the accounting routes and become the corporate controller and get hired in. You can do like Kathy Lesiak, who started out of school, out of MBA in the Treasury Department at HP, and rise all the way to CFO ranks. That's rare based on at least the data set and my intuition. And again, going back to the problem, CFOs, they want to have expertise in a wide range of, very broad range of experiences. And doing one function and doing it well, you aren't going to get the experience in all the other functions. So I would say it's more anecdote, more gut feel, but I would guide you to try to get a wide variety of experiences. I've done business unit finance. I have done roles outside of finance. I have done I've done strategy roles in my McKinsey days. I guess based on maybe intuition or whatever, naturally did that just based on also my personality. And it worked for me. And it seems like, again, on the surface, when you read through these backgrounds, these CFOs, that did for them as well. Banking and consulting, how important is it? So again, these 68, 56 of them spent no time, as best I could tell, at either an investment bank or with a consulting firm. 5 of them, like me, spent time at a consulting firm. So I have time at McKinsey, and so that would apply to me. 6 of them had spent time at one of the investment banks. 1 had spent time at both a strategy firm and a bank. But the vast bulk of them, they spend their careers in corporate finance. I'm not saying it's bad. And for folks who are considering banking and/or consulting, I think it's a great route. I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't actually spent time with McKinsey. I learned more in my 5 years there than I did at Booth. Not taking anything away from Booth, but if you're, it is not a requirement, and it's nowhere near a requirement, and it's not a slam dunk that it really separates you, differentiates you from folks who go straight into corporate finance. how about an MBA? More interesting question, given that all of us either have our MBA from Booth or are in the process of getting it. So I went and looked. And so of the 68, 29 had no MBA. That means that 39 do. Okay. But interestingly, when you think of like the premier MBA programs, and what I flagged here, anybody who was in the top 10 in either the Business Weekend or the Economist MBA 2012 program rankings. Booth, we had 3 alums of the 68 were Booth alums. Harvard had 3, 2. So interesting that the number one program for MBAs for Silicon Valley CFOs was at Santa Clara, and it's a part-time program. And so a lot of folks go there and get their MBA in part-time while they're working in corporate finance role in Silicon Valley, and then that helps springs them into the CFO gig. So I thought that was interesting. So MBA helps. Again, I wouldn't be here myself. I would not have discovered finance if I hadn't gone to get my MBA. But it is not required. And in a premier MBA like Booth, at least in the tech world, is actually just a fraction of the CFOs. How important is the CPA? So I have a CPA. I got it in 2009, so 11 years ago. I was well into my career. I was working with this controller for Microsoft, and he said, "Why don't you have a CPA?" And I was like, "Well, you have to work for an audit firm, don't you?" And he said, "No, you basically have to have enough credits. You have an MBA, you probably do. You have to work for a CPA. I'm a CPA for a year, and so you're working for me for a year. So basically, hope to get a CPA. All you got to do is pass the CPA exam." So I did, and I did it because it helped make up to that point, my number one bugaboo getting a CFO seat was, Hope, you clearly have the strategy side, you clearly have the finance side. Can you do the accounting side? I can tell you today, I am no better accountant today than I was before I even studied for the CPA. But the fact that I can put CPA after my name and it's on my resume, those questions just magically go away. It's just crazy between you and me, but that's how it works. And so after I got my CPA, all the questions started coming in. Well, can you do the investor relations? Can you do treasury? Can you handle tax? Literally those are the types of questions you get. So it's not required in any way, shape, or form. 45 of the 68 don't have a CPA, 23 do. If you have it, maintain it. If you find yourself working for a CPA and you have, and you likely do have the credits that's required to meet the academic requirement, all you have to do is, and I don't say that lightly, you have to pass the CPA exam. It's a lot of time. It's not hard. It just takes a lot of time of studying, but you can do it. And if you have the time, I would tell you, because especially if you're someone who comes from the finance side of the house, getting a CPA will make at least one of the big questions go away. They will stop asking you about and start dinging you for not having the accounting side of the house. You'll get to be like me, where they were dinging you for doing investor relations or doing treasury or tax or whatever. If you want to become a tech company CEO, meaning in some industries, the CFO path is a big path to the CEO seat. Heavy capital intensive industries in particular. Tech, not so much at all. In fact, of the 68 CFOs, only one had been I only looked at the CEOs of the 68 companies, and only one of the 68 had been a CFO in their career. So if you want to be the tech company CEO, I would tell you finance is very unlikely to be the path to get you to the CEO seat of a tech company. In other industries, that would be very different. Again, think extraction industries, think heavy capital intensive industries. That would be a path, but not in the tech world. I did share these findings with some executive recruiters that I know, and they said, "Oh, this is great data, but make sure you emphasize to your listeners that you've been focusing on kind of things you can check the box on. Have you done? Have you done? Have you done? Do you have this skill? Do you have this experience, etc." But that's important, particularly in the early stages of a career. But it is not sufficient to get you to the top. And so their leadership type skills become as important as technical skills and experience. And because can you hire and develop and retain a high performing team and other strong finance leaders? Can you navigate a high ego, high pressure executive team? And influence them to latch onto your priorities and your way of looking at problems and get them to align behind resolving those problems? Can you develop a vision and share it and get people to buy in and follow you? Can you communicate effectively? Oral, written, presentations with both people inside the company and outside the company. So it's important, particularly early in your career. Yes, check the box. Okay, I've done FP&A. I want to go into sales finance now. I want to go into a treasury role, etc. I've worked for a big company. I'm going to go work for a small company, etc. So check the boxes, but make sure that you, particularly as you get further into your career, that you're also sharpening the tool on the leadership side, in addition to the checking the box. And so I guess it's kind of summing it all up before I turn things over to questions. If you want to become a public tech company CFO, I would suggest that you get the tech soon if you're not already there. Get into finance soon if you're not already there, and if you're in either of those, you're already there, stay there. And then again, looking at, being honest with yourself about what environment do you do best in. But I would, I would tell you to start out at a small high growth company with a CFO who has got a real good track record of investing in developing talent. That will set you up for an accelerated development and an accelerated path. If that makes you nervous, if you need some structure, you need some stability, you need safety, whatever, then I would tell you go start in a big brand company, tech, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, etc. That has a strong program for developing finance talent. Particularly if they have a formal program for developing talent. But when you get to the directorish type level, unless you're on the superstar path and you are heading toward potentially being the CFO of that company, I would tell you to then move to a smaller high growth company. I would spend time in multiple functions within finance, so I would seek opportunities to get exposure. I would tell you to invest in yourself a lot. So again, getting your CPA, doing continuing education, just reading and keeping track of what's going on in the industry, the tech world. I would tell you maybe the number one advice I give to my stepdaughter is to invest in networking. Every job that I have gotten in my career, except the one out of business school and Groupon, has come about because of my network. Whether it was because a friend worked there, or again, this current job that I'm in, I was called up by a recruiter that I've been in touch with for 10 years and hadn't found anything. They didn't have it ever right for anything else they were looking at, but this one was. And I wouldn't, didn't know what Infoblox was, would not even looked at it if she hadn't called me. And I hadn't trusted her enough to at least go give it, kick some tires, and then got super impressed with what I saw. The job before this, I was actually interviewing. So I was at Groupon. I'm interviewing to be the CFO for a company. I'll tell you guys, it was AOL. And I got pretty far in the process. And all of a sudden they went dark. And then I learned that's when they were sold to Verizon. So, the job went away. But the recruiter that was working on the role was also then working with Digital River on their CFO week. And oh, by the way, Digital River had been taken private by a private equity firm called Sears Capital. Sears Capital had purchased the part of the security business out of Juniper Networks, and they had hired somebody, a guy named Peter Lukens, another Booth grad, out of a couple years after me. They hired Peter Lukens out of Juniper, and so he was working with them, helping them onboard, Digital River into their platform. And he mentioned me. So two ways, two contacts got me into a role where I got my, finally found somebody. They took a chance on me and gave me the first CFO gig. And so there may be no single thing more important in advancing and growing your career than investing in your network. So keep a LinkedIn profile up to date. Return calls when recruiters call you. Even if you're fat, dumb, and happy in your current job, it doesn't hurt you to take the call, get to know them, give them some names of other folks. They'll be more likely to call you in future. I keep a tracker of contacts. I've got my, the executive recruiters that contact me. I've got my previous managers that I contact, et cetera. And I make sure every 6 to 9 months I go through and I might remind myself I go, who haven't I contacted? Let me reach out to them, give them an update. Whenever I change jobs, I send out an update to my network to say, hey guys, just heads up, this is what's going on with me. I find an article that's relevant to them, I forward it to them. There's a great book. It's called Dig a Well Before You're Thirsty. It's about networking, and that phrase kind of says it all. Waiting to network when you're looking for the gig, the next gig, either because you've been laid off or because you're getting tired and your current employer, or you want to change. Then, and it's not too late, but that is really late to be doing it. So maximize the odds that you have on getting that call for the CFO gig by investing in your network. I would say focus on your software leadership skills. And a new thing I've added, and I meant to put a slide in, and I decided I was voiceover, but one of the things I've learned now, having done now 2 private equity gigs, is that they're a really interesting space to think about growing yourself into a CFO gig. Because again, the thing that's beautiful, I work for, my company is owned by Vista Equity Partners. They have over 60 portfolio companies. They get to know me. They're getting to know Ranga. Ranga's building a brand inside of the Vista portfolio company. And there comes a day, the beauty of it is that unlike other, you kind of get a nice blend of the people that need to make the decisions on hiring CFOs, they've got 60 some roles they could potentially hire them into. And so it's like you get some of the benefits of being hired inside, but instead of there just being one seat limited, there's 60 some seats. And then they're buying companies all the time. And so if you want to become a tech CFO, and it doesn't have to be public, I would tell you to spend time investing and learning about Vista Equity Partners, learning about Thoma Bravo, learn about Francisco Partners or Texas Pacific Group. These big private equity firms who will have portfolios of companies, and get in, like Ranga has done, into a role inside. This is the perfect kind of like director level role to get hired into if your goal is to get to be a CFO seat. Find one of these that's performing well for one of the real known, well run PE firms, and that might be the best path. Again, it's hard to prove data-wise, but it's got to be a high proportion path to getting to the CFO seat, given the challenges that I laid out. Because you get the experience. They have development experiences that are great because they have formal programs that you might get at a mega company that you typically won't get at a $1 billion, $2 billion, $3 billion market cap company like I'm at. They've got all sorts of best practice sharing on how to do things that can give you rapid learning experience that you might get again that won't be comparable, it won't be exactly equal to, but it's comparable to getting experience at a big company. They've got again, there's tons and tons of CFO seats. So anyway, I would encourage you to explore it, because knowing what I know now, I would do my career differently than I've done it. And I would have gotten into the PE family much earlier in my career. And I would have been a CFO earlier, and I would be, and frankly, I would be wealthier than I am today because the guys have good track records. They're good people to get paired up with. So anyway, my advice to you, if you want to be a CFO of a tech company, and it doesn't have to be a public company, and then I would tell you to go look into one of these firms and get to know, find a portfolio company you're excited about. Maybe it's in the town or the city that you live in, and make that your move. So with that, contact me, guys. I'm passionate about developing, helping people develop their career. I'm happy to link up with you. That's my LinkedIn connection. You can send me an email, and I'm happy to chat with booth students, booth alums, and if I can be helpful, I will do so. With that, let me open it up to questions.
So we got a few questions on the Q&A, so we just have a few minutes here, so maybe we can do a lightning round with you, Hoke.
Okay.
The first one was, why were you not interested in becoming CFO for biotech?
Because I don't know anything about biotech. So I'm not a biochemist. I mean, I need to feel like I personally need to understand the product, and it doesn't have to be like, scientific mumbo jumbo with it, that I'd have to feel like I have to take, a few years of chemistry classes to really understand what's going on. And so as a user of technology, I get it. I like it. So it's nothing, that's me as my bias. Again, not to scare you off, but I can show you. If you're interested, I'm happy to share with you. But I do have the deck I described where the first page was, I want to be a tech CFO. I literally have an industry my industry page with a whole bunch of factors, of how much growth is there, how much regulation is there, how much M&A activity is there. And I had criteria and I screened out, and I wanted, high tech was one of the 2 or 3 choices I made. That's how I operate. You don't have to be that anal about planning a career, but that's how I operate. And so that's why.
Next question, when you were at McKinsey, did you actively seek opportunities that would help you develop the skills to become a CFO? What kind of opportunities did you actively seek out at McKinsey?
Well, I mean, I was in a function. So when I started McKinsey, I didn't know I wanted to be a CFO. I knew I liked finance. I was in the corporate finance group. And so every project I did was great experience for becoming a CFO. And so I got lucky a bit, I guess, in that I picked a job right out of school in a function in a team that I got the kind of experiences. So it's pure luck. If you're at McKinsey now and you're looking to get the CFO gig, make sure you hook up. I think the corporate finance group is still there. I'm sure BCG has an equivalent. Bain does too. I would encourage you to get affiliated with them, get exposure to them, so you get some of the training, you get some of the projects that they're on, so you can kind of get some real project experience that will give you some insight of what a CFO deals with.
Okay, this next question comes from Jing. I think I'm trying to understand the wording here, but I think the question is basically, what's kind of like the minimum amount of revenue the company should be generating for it to be your first CFO gig? Like
I don't know. So I guess, is this the ones about the post Series B or certain?
Yeah.
Look, I don't know. So I don't have any data to inform that, and I've never considered like I didn't talk. Let me give you this is Hoke Horne's perspective. There's 3 types of companies. You have pre-IPO companies, you've got public companies, and you've got PE companies. And there's pros and cons in all 3. I've already told you a bit, but when I think about a couple of dimensions, the pre-IPO is the role, the focus of the finance function is going to be on raising money and managing the burn rate and getting the company ready to go public. You're unlike the success of the company is about the magic of the product and does it work. You as a finance person, frankly, have very little success other than making sure they don't run out of money or whether the company is successful. You're going to get less cash from a comp standpoint, but if they go public, you're going to make the most money. But your level of impact and influence is the smallest in the pre-IPO company relative to the other options. On the other, in a public company, it's in a spectrum, maturity, how soon after IPO versus how mature is the company. But again, you're going to be the public face of the company, and a lot with investors. You're starting to have real influence around the planning and allocation of capital and where they make their investments. But until you get to the mature stage, you're still a minor player in the driving of the company. And so, yes, you're at the seat, but you're a small voice at the seat relative to the technology lead, relative to the sales lead, relative to the marketing lead. You will make the highest cash comp. You will get the safest kind of equity comp, but unless you're super lucky, you get at the right company that goes through an explosion, which is rare for a public company. It does happen. My friend Colette Crest and I worked together at Microsoft. She's the CFO of NVIDIA. She joined at $10 billion. It's now $250 billion. I'm sure she's now set for multiple generations. That's a very rare story for a public company. So in some ways you have the safest comp, but it's potentially the least if you're successful in the IPO. But your influence and impact is the medium of the 3. The place where the CFO has the biggest voice is in a PE-owned firm. At that point, the business model is proven, the technology is proven. There's something that has to be fixed. That's why it's been taking private equities. They need to change business models from perpetual licensing to subscription, or the cost structure needs to be changed, et cetera. I am in every single one of Vista's portfolio companies, the CFO is the second most important company. And I can say that factually in terms of the CFO will have the second highest compensation package at the company, because the CFO's role at a PE-owned firm is the most advanced, is the most impactful. It's no longer not as much or near much about the magic of the technology. It's much more about the business model and processes and things like that as CFO guides. And so the cash comp is a little bit less, but it's similar to the public company. You've got more upside on average than the public company, but nowhere near as big as the pre-IPO company. So again, I'm biased given my experience, and I don't like I don't like being on the quarterly earnings cycle that a public company would have. I find PE-owned companies to be the least political environments because all the executive incentives are aligned, et cetera. And so, but there's pluses and minuses in all those. I would tell you if you're going to a pre-IPO company, particularly if it's like Series B or Series C, you're betting on the magic of the company, of the engineering, and you can make a heck of a lot of money. And if you do that, and you're the one, and oh, by the way, you're betting on the magic of the company working, and they don't decide to upgrade from you to someone who's done the role before. And so I won't give you a size. I have no idea. I would tell you it's less about becoming a CFP. A pre-IPO company that's not. Is in some ways is less about getting the CFO seat, and it's more about the big hit and the take public experience that you would get. But from a finance standpoint, you're going to be focused on building out accounting systems. You're going to be focused on building out basic processes, making sure you don't run out of cash, et cetera. And so, nothing wrong with that, but I can't give you a size. If you're Series B, it's you and one other person. That's the finance function. And that's interesting, but you're going to be, CFO is going to be placing calls to collect cash from customers and things like that. So you just have to be comfortable with that.
So I guess a follow-on question to that, if you were a CFO of a smaller company, what would be the odds, or how easy would it be to then upgrade into being a CFO of a larger company?
Well, so I think it depends on how large. So Digital River was we were 1,100 employees and 350 million in revenue. I'm now up to, and we were probably, I think we sold for like 700 million. I've significantly increased that. I joined, when I joined, Infoblox, call it 1.4 billion again. We were our take private price. We're probably now double that or more. We're 1,400 employees, 500 million revenue. So again, I will never make it to the big leagues. I will never make it to CFO of. It's unlikely I will ever be CFO. In fact, I probably don't want to be frank with you. I don't want to be CFO of a $10 billion plus company. I actually like this size. But so you can actually upgrade. It's unlikely it's going to become a route to get to be one of the mega players. That's the way I would say it.
Can you share some quick advice on rising up in a big company?
Work hard. Always work hard. You never know what piece of work is going to separate you. So I will tell you guys, I tend to overshare, but whatever. I was on the short list of superstars at Microsoft. Amy Hood and I, who's now the CFO of Microsoft, we joined within weeks of each other. And she and I were the two golden children of Microsoft. We were on the high potential bench. We had Steve Ballmer, the CEO at the time, both each picking roles for us, et cetera. And part of that was because the project, I told you that Microsoft was a client of mine. Steve Ballmer was my client. So for 3 months, I met with him 2 or 3 times a week and got beat up by him for like 3 months. And so I built up a relationship with him. That was just luck of the draw. But when I went back, I was a CFO, I was CFO's chief of staff. And the piece of work that one of the things he asked me to do early on was he asked me to fix, was his word, his executive sponsor relationship. So Microsoft has a program where their largest customers, think Citibank, think U.S. Army, think Shell, et cetera. A senior executive will be assigned to be the sponsor of that account and to help when the issues arrive and like. And he was tired of getting randomized by the account managers who covered those 8 accounts. And he said, "Hoke, I need you to fix those relationships." So I did some basic stuff. I met with them. I set up a process where they would screen stuff with me and I would help them before it ever got to John. I made them plan proactively. They were used to just calling up and say, "John, we got a deal. It needs to close, 2 days from now. Can you place a call?" He made me I made them actually, I guess, what are the big events coming up this year? When, let's map that against John's travel schedule and we can make sure that it was some basic stuff. I thought nothing of it. He would go out and brag to other execs about how smooth things were. And I started seeing a stream of people come into my office. And so, my exec has asked me to ask you to do, how have you done what you've done so I can do it for them? And when I got the CFO with the Windows gig, one of the VPs said, "Oh yeah, you were the guy that fixed John, that fixed John's exec sponsor firm." That was like 4 years after I'd done it. And it was a teeny tiny piece of work. And so the point being, you never know what piece of work is going to be the one that becomes your calling card. And so the first thing I would do is always do a damn good job, because you never know which piece of work it's going to be. The second is network internally, and find somebody that can be a sponsor for you. And so again, I got lucky. I started my first job at CFO. I had one of the most influential executives at Microsoft, and I knew the CEO. well. And I did good work, and things went well. So I got big jobs. But and longer story, and someday I would be over a drink, I can tell you. But there's luck who plays a role. So John leaves, and Brent Clinicoso I work for, who later became the number 2 at Google, and then went to Uber when they were in the single-digit billions, and raised money for them as a CFO until they were 50 billion. And so, he left. So my 2 champions leave, and so that's why I ended up leaving. So luck in life plays a big role. So in rising in a big company, always do good work, invest, find sponsorship, and seek opportunities to really stand out, because that's what you have to do at a big company. You have to do something that makes you stand out, and so you separate from the pile, and I don't know how you do that other than work hard and get lucky.
So the next question is about leadership skills and best way of developing these skills. I can just say one thing. So I think what you said, Hoke, earlier about you have to be your own advocate. Infoblox has a leadership program, and I just asked my manager, can I be part of it? And he said, yeah, we'll consider it. And then I got chosen for it. So that's one thing I would say. But what do you have in terms of advice for developing leadership skills and training?
That's like anything in life. I would say seek out opportunities to get to practice it. So if in particular things that aren't strengths. So if you're not a great public speaker, join Toastmasters. Seek opportunities to speak publicly. If you're good at public speaking, but maybe you're not the best at developing documents that you can put in front of an executive to explain an idea, then find somebody that's good at it and have them help you, show you. At some point in your career, you'll likely get an opportunity to get a 360 feedback. Take it and really take the input in. Don't debate it, but no matter, I don't care if you were, I don't care if you were the superstar of superstars, and Oprah Winfrey, or think of any other super empathetic, very, very personal person. There's going to be room for you to improve in your leadership. So take advantage of feedback when you get it. Seek out, you want to be a manager, seek out, volunteer to help with recruiting for interns, and then ask to be managed one of the interns for the summer. Ask to volunteer to lead a virtual team that's doing a project for a few weeks or a few months or whatever. And so that you get opportunities to practice. Yeah.
Next question about your CPA. How did you manage getting the CPA? Well,
didn't sleep much. I did 9 months. I took a prep course, and I would probably study 2 to 4 hours a night. And I was working a heavy duty job at Microsoft. And I told my wife, honey, I was like, you're not gonna see me a lot. So I didn't watch much TV, didn't do much, but every night I studied. Weekends I would study. And so this is one where I would tell you not to do it. Do it if you've got the credits. Almost all of you certainly do. You're working for a CPA for a year. That's good. And so do it when you're not. Don't do it. Don't kick it off if you're in a planning process. You're in a corporate FP&A role, and you're getting near the end of the year and you're planning the next year. Why don't you wait? Till 2 months or 3 months in the new year and then kick it off. And get the buy-in from your manager, as part of your investment and your development, and get the buy-in from your spouse, your other significant other, and your family, and just know that it's going to be a brutal period of time, because that's all you can do. It's a lot of study and a lot of memorization, and then you got to take 4 sections of the CPA and pass them all, and then you're done.
How do you go about networking with investors at PE firms to discuss roles that you're interested in the portfolio company?
So you're interested in a PE firm. Go look up Vista Equity Partners. Look up their portfolio companies. There's 65 of them on the website. So see one that interests you, and maybe it's based on the location, maybe it's on the sub industry or whatever. And then reach out to Ranga, reach out to me, and say, hey, I'm interested. And look, if you're a senior person who's almost ready, ready to be a very senior person at one of these portfolio firms, I can put you in touch, and I think it makes sense. I would put you in touch with Betty Hung, who's the kind of oversees the CFO function inside of Portcos. If you're more junior, I would still forward them and say, hey, here's somebody that is interested in X, Y, Z company, and the background looks good. Why don't you consider them? Ranga can help you. Look, use LinkedIn. If you find, you're interested in, I'll pick a random Vista equity company. It's not Infoblox. You're looking at Aptio. They're based in Seattle. Look up Aptio and see if there's any Booth alums that work at Aptio. And if they so, hey, reach out to them. Love to hear more about it and minister because of X, Y, and Z. So there's no magic to it. It's kind of hard, doing, putting the shoe leather to work or whatever that phrase is. Do some research, research top PE firms, then go research the companies, Thoma Bravo, Francisco Partners, Texas Pacific Group, Silver Lake Partners, et cetera. You can probably find a list of the top, technology PE firms. Look up their portfolio companies, find ones that interest you, look in LinkedIn. This is an opportunity, I say, with us. You can network with me, network with Ranga. I'm sure there's other Booth alums that work at other portfolio companies inside of Vista Equity Partners, and reach out to them. It's again not magical. It's just it's work, and it takes time. But me and my peers, the other 68 or 65 or whatever it is, we're looking for talent. And so I might have something now. I don't think I have a ton open at the moment, but I'm sure I'm sure that one of those 65 people would have a role for folks like that are Booth grads. Okay.
Cool. No
Anything else, Ranga?
On the Q&A, Leanne, I don't know if you have anything, but if not.
This was fantastic. What a wonderful presentation. Just thrilling to watch. Thank you so much. The speed was great. Felt like I learned a lot. So thank you guys so much for a fabulous presentation. Ranga, the San Francisco Alumni Club has done great work. And we hope to hear from you guys again soon. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks everybody. Cheers.